and welcome to our third and final industry session of the autumn. Thank you so much for coming. We know this is crazy coming up to Christmas week, and people giving their time and joining for this really important topic is brilliant. So thank you. My name's Julia Andrews Clifford, and I'm the manager of the Young Film Programmers Network Southeast. And I'm a cis woman, and my pronouns are she or her. I'm white, middle-aged, and I'm wearing a semi-Christmas jumper. And I'm in a room that has some paintbrushes and some books in the background. It's my privilege to host today's webinar. These sessions are designed for young film programmers and for others to find out about the film exhibition industry direct from the people who work in it, discussing different kinds of programming and getting access to those experts. So the way we're going to run the session is I get the lucky chance to interview them first and warm them up. And then it's over to you lot to ask questions using the Q&A function. You can do that whenever, but come 5 o'clock, that's when I'm going to be firing your questions to Lizzie. We have closed captions for this session. So if you'd like to access them, go to the bottom of your screen and you should be able to access them there. If there's a problem, go in the chat function where you'll find instructions on how to do that. I think that's it for the housekeeping. So without further ado, let's begin. Thank you so much, Lizzie, for joining us today. As all the film festivals around the world have been working all year in their digital film festivals, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Great. We'd like to, first of all, introduce the festival that you work for. Obviously, today is about disability on film, inclusion and access, but your particular expertise is with learning disability. And the Oska Bright Film Festival, for those who don't know, is the world's leading learning disability film festival. And it's a really fantastic story, which I hope Lizzie will tell us a bit more about. But basically, it started in 2004 with a group of learning disabled filmmakers who got fed up and frustrated with not having access to a platform to show their work, and it decided to make a change, and they created the festival. And now, 16 years later, it is the biggest learning disability festival in the world, and really has taken it into the mainstream, with last year becoming BAFTA accredited. So it's such a sort of inspirational journey in making a difference through film festivals and film programming, that it's so exciting to have you here. And a lot of the young programmers are really in it for that making a difference and making a change. So do, on the questions, if you want to ask about that more generally, please do, okay? It's not just about the topic we have titled it as. If you have other discussions about basically how you can make things happen and change the world, that would be brilliant. So to say a little bit more about Oska Bright Film Festival, we thought we'd start with a short film because the pictures speak louder than I can. So if we could have the short film, which just introduces those of you who don't know about it to the Oska Bright Film Festival. Thank you.
Oska Bright Film Festival is a 4-day film festival in Brighton that shows international films from all around the world, from filmmakers with learning disabilities, autism or Asperger's.
Oska Bright Film Festival is very important. It gives the learning disability community as a whole a creative platform for the wider mainstream that they can see, that gives an insight into their life.
It just feels like this is Oska Bright exploding, becoming much more mainstream and getting people to really engage with it, which is really exciting.
Good evening, everybody!
I love Oska Bright lots.
Well, I loved it. It's amazing and it's incredible. I can go on and on and on. To me, Oska Bright means love, brightness in the sun, beam of light, and loving and caring.
Tell me, what was your instant reaction to the festival?
Exciting as hell. Yes, I would use exploitatives, but I can't. So yeah, sorry. So Oska Bright means so much to me. Carousel, the company, has absolutely changed my life. So I couldn't say any more about it. I love Oska Bright, and I'm looking forward to the next few days. I'm going to all of them. So yeah.
What has your been experience for this festival?
I mean, I don't know how they're made, but absolutely amazing.
What a fantastic promo. And, you know, just to say a little bit that, you know, what I love about the explanation on your website as well is how with less than 5% of disabled people working in the UK film industry, Oska Bright is driven to make change happen. And there have been accolades from other film festivals which say, for instance, collaborations with Oska Bright recognise the power of film to create change and highlight injustices and inequalities within the industry and society as a whole. So passing over now to Lizzie to say a little bit. So obviously there might be an obvious reason that drew you to disability and inclusion issues. But if you can maybe sort of peel it back a bit, and we often start off with how you got into the industry in the first place, what's the background in terms of your college, if you went to college, and that sense of you're now the producer, what was the journey to that place and what drew you to inclusion and access in particular?
Yeah, it's a funny journey, I'll be honest. So yeah, I went to college and did A-levels, and then I thought, okay, I like art, so I'll go and do an art degree. So I moved to Brighton and did a BA in critical fine art practice. And I don't really know what I did for 3 years, probably just made a lot of like rubbish, rubbishy art. But in that time, I think I got a bit, I don't know, I started to like read lots of theory because I had to for my course. I don't think I would have otherwise done that. But then I learned about relational aesthetics and like different theories around engaging people and the importance of making people part of art and bringing people into galleries and making them part of pieces and installations. And I thought, oh, okay, that's great. That's what I want to do. So I finished my degree and then I was like, oh, okay, what now? So I was kind of, because of that work, I was running workshops in schools, in day centres, in care homes, that kind of thing, in filmmaking, in animation, and I was doing that for a bit. And then my friend said there was a job fair for arts organisations, and I went along and I met the director of Carousel, and I'd been doing some like social media and marketing work as well alongside the school stuff. And so I went in doing that for them at first. I was working on a radio show and promoting that. And then they said, would you like to stay on? Would you like to work on the film festival? And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. Because film had always been kind of my medium. And I thought, well, there we go. So in I went, and then I've kind of climbed up or crawled up and just stuck myself in there really. Yeah, so a funny journey, really. But I really found my home in that, and that I think all the stuff that I'd been annoyed with at art school about people not being able to take part in art like I thought they could. I saw that at Carousel, and I saw a way that art can be accessible and can involve people, and people with disabilities, learning disabilities, can be artists and can be recognised for their work. So yeah, it really spoke to me. So
that's really fascinating that obviously you're a maker as well. So coming from an art background and then crossing over into producing and curating. I think a lot of the young programmers in the network are also makers and programmers, and there's that lovely synergy between the two. So that's really fascinating. Also, the foot in the door. Could you give us a little bit of a flavour of that crawl up, because again, that foot in the door, and that's, I mean, really, you are a young person, you're under 30, you look, I don't know, you haven't described yourself yet.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should do that. Yes.
Yeah. But that sense of you've come a long way in a short time. What's your typical week look like as a producer? And what are the kind of skills that you obviously showed to get in that position?
Yeah, it varies from week to week, I'll be honest with you. And because we're such a small organisation, we end up doing a huge variety of things. But in a festival year, it can be, I don't know, organising venue spaces, curating programmes, working with the festival team to put stuff together, speaking to filmmakers,
really varied,
doing marketing, like everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. It's kind of crazy, but it's great. It's I say that's the thing that's maybe a little bit challenging about working in a small organisation, is that you really have to go for it, and you have to do everything, which is good because you learn lots of skills, but it's a lot. It's busy.
Yeah, and I guess it has the sort of quality of, even though it's 16 years old now, as a startup, if it's a small organisation. And I guess a lot of young programmers thinking about the industry as that kind of monolithic, and that often, if you're not in the know, the Hollywood industry or whatever, it's a complete closed book. But to set something up yourself, as a pop-up or as a startup, and then showing that level of initiative in basically trying to hand everything, it kind of gives you the keys to the kingdom if you are doing everything, rather than specializing. There's sort of the dream to get the top job that's specializing in something, but actually it's useful sort of training ground to be in a small organisation, isn't it? How big is the organisation?
So Oska Bright's part of an organisation called Carousel, and there are 10 staff members who work at Carousel. But then on the festival team, there's me, one other person, and a freelancer. So it's tight. It's a small team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. And so, are there any? Obviously, this year has been amazing with the Oska Bites. That's been, and I think, and also young programmers may not have looked on the website, but there are these programs that can go out to cinemas for hire. So there's a whole array of things that Oska Bright do. But is there any particular programs or seasons that you are most proud of, and why? Maybe would be useful.
Yeah, I think the festival team is made up of 10 learning disabled artists. So I work with them really closely, and they all have different roles. But our head programmer is Matthew Kellett, who is amazing. He is such an amazing guy. So he's a queer learning disabled artist, and he was on the Guiding Lights scheme that Lighthouse run, and he's one of the first learning disabled people to be on that scheme. And from that, he had some mentoring at BFI Flair, with Emma Smart, and he came away and he was like, right, there is no representation of queer learning disabled people on screen, so I want to make that happen. And we made it happen, and it's been incredible. The films are great. Everybody loves it. It's become one of the most popular screenings that we have available for hire. And it's attracted, you know, the LGBT plus community into the festival. And it's been fantastic. It's such a supportive community. They really get it. And it's been amazing. Everybody's loved that strand. So we're really excited about that and to see where it goes. And I think it sounds silly, but you know, we realize that if you don't have those people, if you don't have those voices as part of your team, then you're not going to know that you need to do that kind of work. So, you know, we know that we need to bring in, you know, intersectional and more diverse voices into the team so we can put on something that's amazing and showcases like the true spectrum of disability.
I think that's really helpful, actually, again, for young programmer groups who might be thinking, well, we don't have a deaf or disabled person on the team. Maybe we shouldn't show anything. And we'll talk a bit later about issues around, you know, where it might seem that you're, you know, it's not your place to do that. And I like your sort of vibe on that. But I was thinking, yeah, one very obvious thing is to recruit more diversely with the crew you've got, and therefore it kind of rolls in a much more organic way than choosing to maybe specifically focus on that as a season or whatever. Last month we were talking with Melanie Idale from Sheffield Doc-Fest, and she said, and I think it's a really important point, that actually it was disability activism that really started many movements in the cinema exhibition industry about creating safe spaces, and that sense of intersectionality, and where often though, and I don't know what your view is on this, but disability, even though it maybe were the start of that movement for diversity, is still being discriminated against potentially more than other groups in terms of representation. I don't know if you'd like to sort of say anything about that and if that's true or not.
Yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, it's very true. I think it's like, what, 22% of the population are disabled. But then the commitment from the screen industries and broadcasters to have disabled people as part of their workforce is between 5 and 7%. Yeah. And if you compare that to other groups, you know, it's quite shocking. It's quite a shocking gap.
Yeah.
You know, there's a really old creative skill set, screen skills now called, sorry, I sound old saying, census from 2012, and I think it was 0.01% of people working in film exhibition have a learning disability.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, that's no one. That's absolutely crazy. So I think there's so much work to be done, a huge amount of work. I think although this year's really, really challenging for the sector, I think it's made people maybe start to think a little bit more broadly about, actually, you know, you could program something different to the norm and it will bring in an audience. And if, you know, big films aren't going to come to the cinema anymore and they're going to go on video on demand, then there's an opportunity for people to step in and program something that's really cool and that people might have not heard or seen of before. So I think it could be a really exciting time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really opportune moment, isn't it, to be a bit more risky with your programming choices. And, you know, it's also, though, everyone has had a taste of being locked down and that inaccessibility to cinemas. So I think that, you know, one of my questions, you kind of preempted it, would be there's this kind of great opportune moment for programming, but when lockdown ends, what are the pitfalls maybe people might fall into of forgetting this period? And I suppose it's a bit of a convoluted question, but what might young programmers or cinemas need to do to make sure that they don't fall into the old ways as we go out of lockdown?
Yeah, it's going to be really tricky, isn't it? Because obviously business will be the driving force, and making money will be the driving force, which is absolutely fine. So accessibility is going to be low down on the list. But I think we've made, you know, so many great improvements that shouldn't be forgotten about, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just basic stuff, isn't it? You know, like making the time in your program to have an accessible event that's relaxed in some way, that people look at their marketing and think about different groups that they can reach out to, and how they do that, how they communicate, thinking of accessible ways to get in touch with people. But you know, it is the harsh reality that I think a lot of people will be left behind.
So yeah, I think it'd be good to talk a little bit more, because I've got a couple of questions. One on the programming side, and the festival talks about, I love this expression, disrupting the norm and real representation. So I'd like to talk a bit about that, and then we'll talk about kind of infrastructure with cinemas, and also about publicity and marketing before we open it up to the Q&A. So just the first one, what does that mean to you, real representation? And can you talk a little bit about how you might disrupt the norm as a film programmer in this new place we're at?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the representation of disabled people on screen is often pretty bad. Let's be honest about it. You know, there are so many films where a non-disabled actor is playing someone with a disability. And, you know, that wouldn't happen with any other segment of people. I mean, apart from Eddie Redmayne being trans, that did happen as well. But there's a big issue. And the disabled community are rightly pissed off because it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And then, you know, a lot of stereotyping happens with characters in films. You know, disabled people are often made out to be the villain, or the person that's outcast, the outsider. You know, there are so many examples. And for us, we only screen films that are made by or feature someone in a leading role that has a learning disability, autism, or Asperger's. That's it. And even now we get submissions where people aren't, you know, that there aren't disabled actors in the films, and we're not having that. We won't screen those. And you know, I think for physically disabled actors, you know, things might be getting better, but there are still a huge amount of problems. You know, like Me Without You, that's got Sam Claflin in it. I think there was a screening where put on by a disabled programmer, and lots of disabled people came and threw things at the screen, and in kind of like the Room-esque angry way. You know, they were just really, really annoyed, and you know, so for us, we don't want that.
No.
And we want real representation. I think it's happening a lot more on TV than it is in film, to be honest with you. Like Special on Netflix is amazing. That's fantastic. But learning disabled people just don't, they're not on film, and those films don't get made.
Yeah.
You know, there are only a few films in the last few years that have had good representation.
I think that's, you know, the point you made, that it's shocking how many, it's if it was like blackface, it would be immediately jump out at people as racism. But the ableism that is sort of endemic in society and therefore in the industry, it's sometimes harder for that recognition. And so I guess it's really places like Oska Bright and, you know, to become educated about that is a really important thing. I mean, I don't know if you maybe could make some, you've made some film recommendations for us to watch for the watch parties after today. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about some more of those films, because I know we had talked about how that representation really can change society as well. You talked about Sanctuary. Maybe you could just explain the story of Sanctuary, which is one of Lizzie's recommendations for a watch party.
Yeah, of course. So it's about a group of people with learning disabilities who go on a night out to the cinema with their support worker, and two of them break away with the help of their support worker and go to a hotel, because in Ireland at the time when it was made, it was illegal for people with learning disabilities to have sex. So yeah, the film's about that, and also about once that support worker's left, other people go on their own adventures in the city. It's great. It's a really amazing film, and it deals with something that's huge, but also it's very funny and sweet and light-hearted. It's a great film, and since it's been made, the laws have changed in Ireland, and now people with learning disabilities can have sex, which is amazing that a film can do that, and can turn something round like that. Yeah, it's great. I wish more people would, you know, could see it. It's fantastic. We had the UK premiere at Oska Bright, and it was great. You know, the room was electric. It was amazing.
Great. And I mean, that's the power of, so as film programmers, that you could program something and enough cinemas program it, and then it changes the way society sees something. That's really exciting. But also an important part that we haven't talked about that much, but I think will come in the second section, is about getting filmmakers, disabled filmmakers, making and expressing their view. That's where the change will come, but obviously that's an infrastructure issue around the industry. So the two are kind of closely entwined. And there was one last thing I wanted to mention where it's complex. So you talked about Sia, which is, she's putting out a new film called Music about a non-verbal autistic lead character. Maybe you'd just like to say a little bit about the controversy around that, because obviously it can get quite complex, the debate. So you know, Sia has a disability herself, and is making this film, but she's cast, I think it's the girl who's been in every one of her music videos, who is an incredible dancer, like so talented, but she doesn't have autism. So there's huge uproar from the autism community about that, and people are just really, really upset that she didn't take the time to speak to the community, to think about someone that she could work with. There are so many autistic actors out there who are saying, I'm here, you know, I want to work, I'm ready to work, but you know, she's decided not to. And I read a quote from her, and it was just something like, oh well, I'll make a great film, you know, it'll be fine. But you know, when you're
that high profile and you're making something that millions of people will see, like, why not make a statement? It shouldn't be a statement, it should be normal, but it's not. But you could really, set the tone and lead the way, but she just hasn't. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens when it comes out, and if people will give it the time of day.
So I'm aware, thank you, that we're at 5 o'clock. So I've got more questions, and we'll hopefully I'll be able to get one in at the end maybe. But let's go to some questions because we've got a really relevant one here. It's from Jay, who says, as someone with Asperger's, I've wanted to suggest films to my programming group that deal with the learning disabilities, either implicitly or explicitly, as I believe it would be great to explore these films with a group of primarily neurotypical people. Are there any tips you have for trying to share these films with these groups without trying to force the films upon them? And could you also suggest some things to discuss in these conversations? Whoa, great question.
Blimey, yeah. Well, gosh, I think you just need to get it in front of them and let them see it. Maybe just don't say anything, like let the film speak for itself. I don't know, I wonder if people have a lot of preconceptions about what a film might be like, and you don't want that to kind of cloud their judgment, I don't think. And that happens a lot when we show films, or if you tell people, sometimes when I tell people what I do, they're like, oh, that's lovely, or oh, okay, I'm sure that's nice. But then they come and they see the films and they're like, oh right, yeah, it's actually good. And I'm like, yeah, right, that's the argument. That's the thing I've been trying to say for so long. So I think if you can get the film in front of your peers and just let it speak for itself, and maybe, if the actors have a disability, but that's not obvious, don't mention it. See what people say and then say, well, like, you've seen it, you think it's great, and this is why it's also really, really important, and I think it's important that we show it.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think that sense of being ghettoized is problematic. And again, we talked about that last month in terms of LGBT, where if you do a season or there's a LGBT film festival, there is a sense it can be kind of ticked off and put to one side, whereas the wider argument is how it just becomes another film. That's a different representation. I think that what Jay's also saying, I would say, is if you look at the recommendation that Lizzie's put for It Me, which is a Oska Bright showreel, it's so great in terms of different perception. It's very physical, visceral kind of series of films. And in that sense, it's just engaging in that you are feeling something different, just the thing that film does about empathy. So I think, yeah, what Lizzie's saying is just, maybe you need, could you suggest some things to discuss in these conversations? Would you just add anything to that? Because we'll do recommendations as well. I think it's getting good recommendations that might be the key to this question. But yeah. Would you just put it through, would you say anything? Would you just let them have free discussion, or are there any good questions that you could steer towards a certain area?
Well, I definitely, look at the stats about representation and lay it out to them and just say, like, look, this is the state of things, and we have the opportunity to change that. You're the future, you're the people that can make a difference. You can put those films on, you can get audiences to see a whole new perspective. I think that's the That's the argument. I would just lay it bare, because it's stark. It's really stark. And if you don't do it, then who is going to do it? You guys have got to pick it up.
The statistics.
Put too much pressure on you.
It would be good to have some statistics, actually. I wonder if there's an easy source you have or could point us in the direction of, because they are really stark, and it is quite shocking when you see that written down in black and white. Are there any places you could direct us to for that?
I'd happily send something round afterwards. Yeah,
Brilliant.
so people can see. Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
great. Thank you. We've got another one here about representation from an anonymous attendee. It was fantastic to see Zach, the star of the Peanut Butter Falcon, presenting the Oscars. But at the same time, the lack of representation is so disappointing. So we've kind of covered this, but do you think representation is getting better? There are films such as Run and Sound of Metal coming out this year, but not many with people with learning disabilities. Or if there are, it's not covered by publications and critics.
Yeah. I mean, if we could show feature films, we absolutely would, but they don't fit into our criteria. So, we've had Sanctuary. Oh my God, my mind's going to go completely blank. But there's like one every 2 or 3 years, perhaps. So for learning disability, I kind of hope that Peanut Butter Falcon would open the door to people reconsidering the films that they might commission. And Zach is so amazing in that role that, I really hope that would happen. And we might see that in the coming years. I don't know, but I don't know if it's getting better. I think TV is getting better for sure. There's an episode of The Crown that's been co-directed, I think by Access All Areas. I don't want to spoil it for anybody though.
Spoiler alert!
But people with learning disabilities were consulted about the episode. They were involved in the direction. They played those characters. It was all. It was perfect, and a perfect example of how things should be working. Yeah, I mean, The Reason I Jump will be coming out, I guess, but that's a documentary. But it is amazing and definitely worth a watch. It's an incredible film.
Yeah. I wonder if the way the representation goes, and I'll be shot down maybe for saying this, but it's films like Music by Sia that are flawed fundamentally, but her argument is, but it is a great film about learning disability. So there's that sense that, of course, it's much better to have learning disability represented by learning disabled actors and actresses, but maybe Hollywood is never going to be on the cutting edge of that. But it's a beginning, and there's the same debates about LGBTQ representation, Black representation. It's like it's a long journey to getting the right. I was going to say the D certificate, because I've just read about one of the film festivals that puts a D certificate, which is basically like, yes, we approve, this is like the right way to do it. But I wonder if that journey might be a long one, but at least there's a beginning. I don't know, or not, or is it better not to, and just is it worse? That's an interesting debate. I don't know what people think. Might want to feedback in the Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing as well, isn't it? Like, we need to rip it all up and start again, because the film industry just isn't welcoming and able to make the adjustments that it needs to for learning disabled people to be part of that experience. It's just not a thing.
And that's where it starts, isn't it? I mean, we've got another question here which leads straight to that. It's from Charlotte. I'm deafblind and an aspiring programmer. I'm finding it hard to find accessible opportunities within the film industry / programming. Do you have any advice for people who want to get into film programming, disability-centric film programming, and how, you know, any advice on getting their foot in the door?
I mean, I would maybe go to someone like Screen Skills and see what's going on and get in touch and tell them who you are and what you want to do. And I'm sure they'd be, you know, really, really helpful and want to support you. I think that's the thing that maybe we're seeing at the moment, is that people are being more aware that they, with their recruitment in venues and organisations, that they need to be making more of an effort and really taking the time to find and support people to make applications and to come to interview. So, I mean, I would reach out to people and I would tell them who you are and be, you know, be proud of who you are. And I think that people, I would like to think that people would jump at the chance to work with you. You know, you have such an insight that would be so beneficial to lots of venues and organisations.
Yeah, I mean, to chip in there, BFI, diversity and inclusion standards are making it compulsory for organisations to really look at their diversity and inclusion. So in some ways, you know, there's that, the more pronounced you can be about how you have this skill and you can bring that to an organisation, it feels like, but whether it's all just, you know, it's hard to know if it's on paper, but I feel there's a genuine sense, especially since lockdown and the changes after Black Lives Matters, about, you know, diversity and equal opportunities really being looked at properly again. You know, it's obviously like, how has the equal opportunities argument not moved forward in however many years? Not really. So I actually think it's a good moment. So, you know, and that, you know, maybe you should, you know, you could look up on the diversity standards and get informed about what cinemas and venues are actually asked to do. And you'll find that you might be, you know, in demand. So
yes, definitely. I should hope so. Like, that's everybody should be like jumping at the chance to work with you. Like, you know, there's Deaf Fest. I don't know if you've heard of Deaf Fest. They might be worth a shout, dropping them a line. And Encounters Film Festival have an amazing deaf program. So it'd be worth dropping them a line and just, you know, telling them about yourself. I think that's it. Like, just go for it. Tell everyone who you are.
Yeah. And there's also, the ICO have a big resource about developing deaf audiences in your venue, and there's a big drive to make that change with subtitle, you know, choosing subtitle films, looking at, you know, better screening times. So I think you could look at that as well, and we could put that in the link, where it's something where you get informed about what's out there in the industry and what the requirements are. Would you have some list of film festivals that people could check out? Because obviously that's often where the cutting edge work and films are coming. And maybe they've got a digital access to some of these international film festivals now, that you can look at the upcoming films. What ones do you know of, Lizzie? Because you mentioned that one.
Yeah, well, there are the UK doesn't have any disability. I mean, there's Deaf Fest, and there's us, and Together the People, but it's, you know, it's a small number, and there are so many more around the world. I'd be happy to send a list so everyone can have a look. It's
that'd be great. That'd be great.
Europe's way ahead, let's just say that. And it's the same with film production as well. You know, the rest of the world is leading the way. Like, Australia are doing some amazing stuff. They have so many great disabled theatre companies and stuff, but yeah, we're lagging a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be great to have that list. So there's Real Abilities in Toronto, I saw, and the
Yes.
Superfest in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you're kind of in the world and the joy of Google, you can, actually start to really research what's going on better outside of our shores.
Yeah.
The other part of that question was about, making films. And as we said at the beginning, lots of young programmers are also filmmakers. Can you signpost any career opportunities for disabled people, for Oska Bright? There's a question here, which is slightly tangential, but not really, is would you be entirely against working with non-disabled people for the festival, your festival? I'd love to work with you once I graduate, but I'm not disabled. So there's obviously scope, if you're not disabled, to work. I don't know, is there?
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we need volunteers, and we need people to come in and support what we do. We, just because we're a small team most of the time doesn't mean it's like that when it comes to the festival, because it's a big thing. So we definitely need people, and I'm sure that when we'll be looking, maybe towards the summertime, we'll be looking for some people to get involved. So there are opportunities, most definitely, and I think there are a lot of opportunities to work with learning disabled people, in lots of different ways. So if you're interested in that, there are a lot of ways to get started. But yeah, drop me an email, whoever you are.
Yes, I think it was anonymous. And there's another anonymous attendee says, does Oska Bright Festival offer any opportunities to make young voices heard with a section for non-professional or aspiring filmmakers with disabilities on the autism spectrum?
Yes, we do, most definitely. Yep. We have a young people strand, which is 25 and under. We noticed that those films weren't getting made anymore. I think a lot of funding disappeared for people. So we've really ramped up our effort to try and reach people. On our website, there's a resource guide that we made with Interfilm, an accessible filmmaking guide, and some video tutorials and things like that. But yeah, most definitely, we're really, really interested to meet young filmmakers. You're the future, so we want to know who you are. And I think, it sounds a bit naff maybe, but we have a lot of long-term submitters and people who submitted maybe when they were 18 and now still with us 10 years on and have made a whole amazing slate of films, and that's really important to us. And we try and support people throughout the years. It's not like you just come and we show your film and then that's it. We really try and work with people, and we're really keen to pull people out and to help people find ways into the industry. And we really want to support that. It's more than just a festival, I think. So yes, we do.
That's great.
And please send in your films.
Yeah, to have that mentorship in a way, and that progression is such a massive thing, because a lot of young programs might get access to a week project where they might make a film with BFI Academy, but that sense of where there's sustainable support to keep going and improving. There is a submission process that you're looking for films for the next festival. So you might want to flag that, and we'll also maybe say a little bit about that. When's the deadline? And people can submit their films for the March. No, I don't know when the festival is. Tell me.
So, because we're a biennial festival, so our next festival, we hope, will be next October, November. So we're looking for submissions now. We're looking for any kind of film made by or featuring people with learning disabilities, autism and Asperger's. We're looking for shorts and features. We're on Film Freeway and you can submit through there. You can just head to our website, which is www.oskabright.org, and you can go through there. And submissions will close at the end of March, and then we will spend hours, weeks, months watching films, and then the festival will happen next October, November. And also we're planning to do lots of kind of industry focused sessions as well this year. So, you know, how to get your film into other festivals, because now we're BAFTA accredited, which is great. We want to make sure that people know how to submit their film into other BAFTA accredited film festivals so you can win a BAFTA. We want you to win a BAFTA.
Yes.
Let's do it. So we're going to be doing lots of stuff like that, some pitching sessions, maybe a 24-hour film competition, so lots of additional stuff as well, lots of support and opportunities to connect you to people in the industry and to get you cracking, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. So obviously that link, I think, has just gone on the chat, and we'll follow up this. There's another, I'm aware of the time, so I want to sort of combine a couple of questions. For you recommended, I'm going to answer one, It Me, which is a reel of shorts from Oska Bright, which is amazing. And you can watch that free as a network member. If you do, there's also a little form if you want to send that back. We'd love to hear how you found that. That showreel can be booked by cinemas. So as programmers, that's also, if you go on the Oska Bright website, there are a lot of showreels that you can book. But obviously you don't get to see all of them. You have to kind of buy it before you can see it. But the It Me one is there for you, courtesy of Lizzie and the festival. Life Animated was recommended. It's on Netflix about, it's a documentary. It's brilliant. Sanctuary, we've talked about. The Peanut Butter Falcon, we've talked about. Are there any others that you would recommend? And you've talked about TV. There's another question here about Atypical, which is mainstream and seems to be well researched. And you said you liked that, but maybe just a bit of like some other recommendations for TV or film that you can think of off the top of your head.
I can't. Is Atypical? Has he got autism though? This is like always my thing. I can't remember if
I don't know.
I'll have to look. I can't remember. But if you haven't watched Special on Netflix, it's incredible. It's so good, and it's got a second season which should be coming out next year, I think. I really recommend that. And then the reason I jump, like I said earlier, a documentary about autism, which is based on a book by a Japanese guy with autism, and it kind of follows different people with autism around the world and how they communicate and their lives, how they live in different parts of the world and how the kind of challenges that they face. It's an amazing film. It's fantastic. Hopefully that will come out this year. I can't. Oh, yeah.
Don't worry. We'll put together, and maybe Lizzie might have some, and we'll put a list out.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
will go to everyone with, again, the link to It Me, because that you can get for free. A lot of them weren't free, unfortunately, but maybe you have to pay your £3.50 to get in there. And then I would just want to finish with a little bit about, so obviously young programmers, their choice of film to screen can make a difference. But what can they do in terms of the publicity and the copywriting? Really like simple checklist that they could do that would make their general screenings more accessible. We haven't really talked about accessibility because that's a massive discussion. There's a lot of documentation about that, and we haven't really had time to cover that, but again, we can put some links in. But yeah, just as young programmers or young people working, you know, in a pop-up or their own, how can their publicity be more welcoming for a safe space for all audiences?
I think that's a great thing, just to say that, you know, just to say that you welcome everybody. There's a lot of guidance around relaxed screenings. The Inclusive Cinema website has some really great resources about that. And there's some stuff on the ICO website that I believe just gone out in that marketing roundup. There's some stuff in there. We've done a section in there, so I would recommend checking that out. But you know, just thinking about the language that you use, that it's not complex, that you use simple language, looking at maybe using symbols next to times, dates and places. If you look up easy read guides, there's lots of documentation about putting together stuff that's accessible and how to use those symbols. But I think just saying, you know, this is an access event, everybody's welcome, you can move around the space, you know, the lights will be low, but you can still find your way around, that you're welcome to come and go as you please. There's so much out there, but yeah, I just think it's about being clear, and thinking about, you know, other ways to reach people. You know, could you look at groups in your area? Could you do the outreach? Maybe they might not know you're there, so I would just do a little bit of research, see who's out there, and make them part of your audience, welcome them in.
Fantastic. We've run out of time.
Oh no.
I know, just as we're getting into it. Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone for those fantastic questions, and all the links and things like that have been discussed. We will get together and get in an email round. Thank you so much, Lizzie. It has been a pleasure to have you before Christmas. And just to flag to everyone, have a great Christmas holiday. We will be back in January. Following up this season, we're going to look at short films and activism with Philip Ilson from the Short Film Festival. And so thinking about how you can really make a difference in 2020, which we're not out of COVID yet, but when we do come out, those screenings are going to be so much more welcoming and accessible through what we've learned in lockdown, I think. So huge thank you to you all. Have a great Christmas. Have a break and see you in January. Thanks for coming, and thanks again to Lizzie.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.